Good evening. Those ones in the US Central Standard Time, it is 12 noon. It is 1 Eastern Central Time, and it should be 8 East African Standard Time. So good to have you here on the show, KDL TV, with a special focus on the Kenya we deserve. On our third series today, where we're going to focus on the role of the young professionals in the social, economic, and geopolitical development of Kenya and diaspora. In today's show, we are privileged to have some very young, promising future leaders of our nation and the diaspora community to help us what's happening in the country and how the diaspora community and the homeland can work together to make sure that we leave a better generation for our nation. So on show today, we do have three panelists. One, we do have Professor Priscilla Washila, who will be joining us shortly from Dallas, Texas. We'll also be joined today from Nairobi, Vihona Asonga, technology expert, giving us insights on what's happening on the ground, not just in Nairobi, but across the country. And also back here in Minneapolis, we do have Sami Reli, a political analyst and one excellent community organizer here in the diaspora community. So very happy to have the three panelists on the screen now. Okay. Well, to begin with, guys, it's very good to see you live on show. Just be aware that we're streaming this live on Facebook, live on YouTube, and also live on Twitter. And so for those ones who are joining us live right now, before we get into the discussion, please feel free to go on social media platforms, Facebook, KDL TV, Twitter, as well as YouTube, and please join the conversation. So should you have any question, please feel free to post that question and or comment there. And then later on the show, we'll have our guest panelist respond to those questions. So again, what I want to do here very quickly is to allow the panelists introduce themselves. I'll begin with my very good friend, Professor Priscilla Washila.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, Dr. Okari. It is a pleasure. This is my first time on KDR TV, but I'm honored. As mentioned, I am a professor, specifically in the public health field, but also a licensed professional counselor. So my focus looks at behavioral activities and how those affect how we empower and impact society. But I am also focused on empowering youth as well to know their purpose and how they can impact the community as well. Thank you for having me.
To get to know you and to call you a friend. We'll get back to you in a moment for further details. And then now we go to Nairobi. Viona, make us jealous about what's happening at home.
Habari wa Kenya. My name is Fiona Songa, CEO of the Technology Service Providers Association of Kenya, that brings together both local and international and regional service providers. Anyone offering services within Kenya, our membership is up to 150 corporate companies. But I'm here to just give views and share as a fellow Kenyan on what opportunities, what can be done, what is this Kenya we want to see, and I look forward to a very fruitful conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Viona. Great work in Nairobi, and always good to see two lady panelists here who are going to give us good insights on not just what the ladies can do for our country and world, but what it really means for our future. With that said, again, now back to my neighbor here, Sami, who is also the man with money, mtu wa pesa with JP Morgan. Sami Reli, and a political strategist. I think most people know him very well. Sam, please, if you could introduce yourself to our viewers.
Thank you very much, Daktari. Once again, Kenyans, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Sami Reli, as you had. By profession, I'm a banker. I'm a vice president for market expansion for JP Morgan Chase, one of the biggest banks here in America. But not only that, I'm a Kenyan, a proud diasporan Kenyan, and very interested in the shaping of our country and making sure that our country gets to the best, to become the best, not just in East Africa, but in the world too as well. And so pleasure to also join my fellow panelists and looking forward to a great discussion.
Oh, very good. Very good to know you. Of course, very privileged to call you a dear friend. And of course, for our viewers, myself here, Dr. Jeremiah Okari, who also to be the Director of Administration and Operations for One Voice Consortium, which is an umbrella organization of Kenyans around the globe, based here in Minneapolis. On my daytime job, this is what I do, but regularly I am a professor with Minnesota State colleges and universities. So let's get back to the niche details of the Kenya that we deserve. Of course, lots of people are talking about Gen Z and what's happening in the streets of Nairobi and elsewhere across the country. Their emotions are very high, but what we're going to try to do here is to move away from the emotions and focus on some reasonable objectivity. What really does this mean for today, and where do we go from here? So we'll begin our friend, Professor Priscilla Wachira from Texas. Priscilla, very quickly, what's your reaction really overall to what's happening in the country?
Yes, so definitely to answer from the psychosocial aspect, I think as a nation, or even just specifically as the country of Kenya, we have yet to come to a place where we can address emotional trauma because it's very layered. And so, with the events that have taken place, once there's arrest, there's not really that space to acknowledge that specific event. And so, I will be honest and say the political protests that have taken place have really just shed light to the deep emotional traumatic wounds that Kenya is undergoing. And we can see that through the voices of the youth. We can see that they're actually empowering us to stop and process and say, how long are we going to normalize dead bodies on camera and just act and go on the next day as if everything is okay? Um, and I think with the Gen Z and how they have been moving, one of the things that has empowered me looking at it from a psychosocial standpoint is that emotions are uncomfortable for most Kenyans. Some, I don't want to generalize, but I think we have been called to unmask and kind of look in the mirror about how are we handling emotions? How are we handling the psychological processing of dead bodies, of violence and unrest, right? Are we able to pause and say that as a country we are not okay, right? And so I've been looking at it and I'm really concerned about the post-traumatic stress that is going to linger. Unfortunately, I don't want to be a prophet of doom, but right now it's almost the frenzy that is going on. There's a lot of voices, a lot of choices, but when I look at it from the psychosocial standpoint, I'm concerned, but I'm hopeful that although this is bringing a lot of chaos, maybe this will be the introduction to a conversation that we as Kenyans have been needing to have for a very long time. And that is our mental health, right? Dealing with anxiety, dealing with anger, dealing with strife. And a lot of that, we could sit here and it's a long conversation, Dr. Okari. It's very layered, but it goes even further into our parents and their parents and their grandparents. And so the emotional trauma is layered, but I think this is that event that is being used to unmask that, and I am looking forward to the conversations that will unfold through this, kind of bringing everything to the light.
Oh, thank you, Professor Washida. As Ben changes the names on the screen to make sure that we have the correct names matching each of the panelists. Sorry for that technical hiccup there. So, thank you, Priscilla. See, we're talking about the emotions. Lots of people in the streets, of course, and on social media, there's lots of emotions, right? As Professor is talking about here. Back to you, Sam, maybe, if you could put this in context for us. That generation from a political point.
Thank you, Dr. You know, Professor Priscilla, she's very right in what she mentioned about the emotions and all that. But I'm looking at it as this has been boiling up. This has been boiling up. And for me, when I look at it on the economic issues, especially, the young people have been very much affected. When you look at the population of Kenya, around 75%, give or take, is what we call a youthful population. And out of that youthful population, we also look at the literacy levels that we have among that population. It's one of the highest when you look at Africa in general. And that being said, we're also having the highest unemployment rates amongst the youth in Africa. Kenya is among that. So I looked at it and tried to figure out what exactly was happening. And I think this has been boiling up since way back time immemorial. And when different youths were in place, that is from my forefathers, my fathers, ourselves, I'm a millennial. So when we were trying to strive for the better Kenya, and it got to that boiling point of we cannot hold it anymore. And so when you see our young people out in the streets, I think when you look at especially the tax bill, that was a tipping point. And it's gone so far that now leadership is really needed to bring ourselves together. And we're also looking at young professionals like the panelists that we have. What role do we have to play in ensuring that our youth are well taken care of? Their mental health, especially. I'm with Professor Wachira here. The postmortem trauma that's coming after this, even if things settle down, how are they going to be able to raise themselves? How are they going to be able to be productive in the workforce, more innovative, at the same time, want to be those patriots that are figuring out that our country also should come first. So there's a lot to figure out, and I'm glad that especially KDR TV and One Voice Consortium is having these platforms where we can be able to share that. And I'm looking forward to a conversation whereby we can encourage people to dialogue. And I think that will go hand in hand with the mental health of being able to come and share and talk how you're feeling and see what can we be able to do collectively as a community. I remember when I was growing up, we were being told we were raised by the community. If I did something out there, I'll be disciplined in the community. My parents would be told about it. I'll get disciplined again. It's a communal thing. And long time ago, we used to see that we want the best for our young people. We always told the young leaders, young people are the leaders of tomorrow. That vision should be able to be realized here in the future too as well. Thank you.
Oh, excellent, Sam. Thank you. Well, thank you. And then, in a moment, thank you again for the good work you do, Sam. Not just here in Minneapolis, but for the diaspora community. Appreciate your work. But now let's switch focus to Nairobi, and we do have Viona. Viona, of course, we have had these talks on the side, and like I said before, I was in Kenya last month. Seeing the young people in the street, and more particularly, unlike previous times, seeing a lot of young women in the streets trying to change society. If you could make a comment from that, I'm going to stick for a few more minutes so that you focus on, give us on what actually is happening on the ground, and then also help us understand what is the impact of the technology, whatever they need, on what's happening on the ground. Viona?
Thank you so much, Daktari. And I think the previous speakers have quite ably described scenarios of what's happening, both Professor Priscilla and Sam. And from the ground where I sit, I just want to put a few things right. Our education system went through transformation. When we had the Kibaki presidency, we were able to get all children into school. And these kids went through primary school, high school, have since now finished university. And the going to school was go to school so that you can get a job, you can be able to earn a living, you can be able to make some money, have an income, so to say. Only for them to finish and they realize, first of all, they cannot get loans. They don't qualify for any loans to start any business. Then they cannot get the jobs that they think they have earned the degree for because employers are asking for years of experience. So where do they get the experience from? So they are built in, and they're trying to just make things ends meet. And then they can't move out of home because they have to continue staying with their parents so that the parents can help foot the bills. Now, when you have someone who's extremely educated and you're not giving them the opportunities that they need, they become very frustrated. We have seen graduates who are watchmen, and that can be quite disheartening. We have graduates who are driving matatus, who are makangas of matatus, not because they want to, but because there is nothing else. We are not creating enough jobs to absorb the graduates that we have. And that frustration eventually had been piling, but eventually the volcano was going to explode. And it's still not yet finalized. There's still a lot of lava deep down that is going to keep trickling out. Why? Because this time round, we have seen demonstrations by a cadre of young people who ordinarily never went to the streets. They have not yet been joined by the lower class. We call them the Baba group, those who, if the opposition say go into the streets, they go in and they are much more chaotic and they are much more frustrated. We've had the lower class of our social system running in the streets over the years. For the first time, middle class, upper class kids have been in the streets. And some of them have been in the streets with their parents. I know mothers who said, I can't let my children go and run there against the police alone. I'm going in with them. And they've gone in with them. It has been this generation that we empowered through education, letting them know that they had rights. And they had a right to certain things, and they had rights to these. And these are the kids who, from some of us growing up, we never knew that you could do a tour of parliament. But I remember when I started working in the early 2000s, when Kibaki's regime began, buses used to come with kids from primary school to go and tour parliament, and they'd be given tours of parliament everywhere. So they knew that this is where the law is formed, their rights would be described to them, and this is how you acquired your rights. So we really empowered them. And once you have empowered a section of the society, we cannot just dismiss them. It's unfortunate that we are still going through, on the ground, we are still going through the process. I've lost a member of staff in these demonstrations. Eric Shenny was part of my team. He had a job, but he understood where the rest of his team were, the rest of his peers were. He felt there are things that needed done proper. Because I remember when the housing tax was introduced, and then other levies started changing, NSSF started changing, NHIF started changing, and it became very difficult to now, figure out, are we paying, are we not? And I'll just say, let's just do the deductions. If the law changes, we can always reverse internally. But let's be ready to do any submissions. And one time he asked me, Madam, you're being deducted, it's almost 45% of your salary is going into taxes of all manner. And I said, yes. He said, no. And then when he looks at how the accountability is happening, how is government then accounting for this that they collect from you? What services do you get? Because when it comes to, for example, NHIF, there's a limit on what you can benefit. So you can't even benefit worth what you put in. When it comes to NSSF, you're not even sure you'll get that money at the end of the time. There've been no systems of accountability to demonstrate that these funds are collected and they are used properly. So the demand for transparency and accountability is very high within an empowered generation that wants to see change. And when they go in for the change and the shooting becomes real, and then now that's where the shocker comes in, because they begin to realize that nobody listens. It's like it's a hoax.
Okay.
You go through this cycle and then you're left hanging. And there is where we need the skills of people like Priscilla to come in and help, because we've had demonstration on and off that even in my own office, we've not had time to regroup and discuss Eric's death.
Okay, so let's take this. Okay, Fiona, thank you. You see, the time I want to come to you, but I'm going to stick with Priscilla for a moment. But let's take note of the key words from Fiona. She makes a very important point that we need to talk about. She's talking about a generation. In revolutionary science, we call those the lumpen proletariats. These are the educated class, but who are undereducated, underskilled, who have dreams, but those dreams cannot be satisfied by anybody. Meaning that if you have today a politician come and promise tomorrow, they're most likely going to respond. And she also, as a technology expert, is making key points here. It's not that they're in the streets. They are actually on their smartphones, right? They're getting that. So in other words, we're saying there are those ones dying in the streets, but there are also those ones who are very frustrated on their keyboards across the country, unlike what we've seen before. So For you, Professor Priscilla, you're an expert in these issues. I could, if you don't mind, please try for us. What does imposter syndrome mean and identity crisis relative to what's happening? Bring some in to give a political perspective.
So, the previous speaker, the name just left me, but she's ended with a comment that said it feels like a hoax and you're left hanging. And we obviously can see the result of when people's voices are not heard for a long time. There's a level of patience that we all have, but as a society, once those voices are left to where they feel as if everything that we do is a form of being gaslighted, which means gaslit is a definition we use in the psychological field of making people feel as if the emotions that they are expressing are not real, almost as if they are a figment of their imagination when they do have the facts. So that ties into imposter syndrome, right? If we, let's say the youth, are made to feel as if we know what we're saying, we're bringing you the facts, but it just feels like a dream because then you make us feel as if what we're saying is nonsense or it's not true. To some, it can make them feel when they get into a place of being able to express themselves through their career or through their education, that imposter syndrome comes in. And it's defined as a condition of feeling anxious and not experiencing success internally, despite being high performing in external and objective ways. So I could have the degree, I'm sitting here, I can be qualified, but if I have been in an environment that does not affirm my voice, that does not affirm my ideas, like you said, Dr. Okari, the Gen Z are on their smartphones. They're doing the research. They are going to find ways to have their voices be heard because they can see the research. I mean, the World Health Organization report ranked Kenya the 5th among African countries with the highest number of depressive cases, right? And, you know, 1 in every 4 Kenyans may be suffering from a mental health illness. But once that one person decides to step out and say, I feel this way, I'm actually going through these things, these are my symptoms, and maybe the other 4 or the other 10, depending on their community, says, no, you're just being dramatic, la, you know, twende out, let's have a cup of tea, you'll feel better. But it's deeper than just trying to kind of, you know, celebrate or have community around you. This is something that has to be treated in a clinical lens, which then brings me to the report that I just stated, that the World Health Organization showed that Kenya was among the few states that did not allocate a separate budget for mental health, with government expenditure that accounted to only 0.1% of the total budget. So now this translates back to what even Sam was saying of adequate funds, adequate use of resources to increase these campaigns that can raise this awareness. Because a nation, a people, they are empowered when they're given the knowledge, when they're given the resources, the literacy levels. But how can we improve literacy rates if we don't even have the resources to bring in experts to do that? Or maybe we do have the resources, but they're just kind of pushed to the bottom because it's not as important. So again, this cycle of imposter syndrome can display itself in many ways. You know, one of us sitting here could know, okay, Mr. Sam is a banker. He has the degree, he has the study, but I'm using him as an example. There may be those thoughts of, are my ideas really being heard? I know I saw that. I know I read the data. I did the numbers correctly. But then again, back to Miss Fiona, when the resource or the person comes back and says, oh, thank you, all is well, it's not well. You're left hanging. You're not heard. So you can see how this cycle with a lot of layers is repeating itself. Like Sam said again, this is generational. It's deep. And we have to start having these conversations now.
And those are the conversations we have here, Professor Washira. By the way, thank you for making good points. And those ones now joining us live on streams, YouTube and Facebook, take note of Professor Washira's book, Seated. If you could find it and read it, then you get what she's talking about in details. So, Sam, to you, you hear the ladies eloquently explain the frustration, as we noted in Nairobi. And then here is Priscilla giving a very good perspective about the emotional aspect of it. But most important to note as I get to you, they always say, if you are not on the table, then you are on the menu. And if you're not on the menu, that means you're under the table. And if you're under the table, the question is, why are you under the table? Why don't you have your own table? Meaning, Gen Z in Kenya, they're saying, guys, we are not on the table. We are not even on the menu. We are not even under the table. So, if you were to bring the Gen Zs to the table, what role do you think they can play effectively in the socio-economic and geopolitical development of our country, so that for sure in the days to come, in years to come, we say this is the kind of Kenya that we deserve, and that is the kind of Kenya we leave for the next generation? Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, this runs really deep, and I like this conversation because looking at where we're coming from, um, I'm looking at the leaders who used to be there a long time ago. And when I talk about long time ago, I'm looking in the 80s and the 90s. I'm an 80s kid, so coming to the 90s, we had people like Jeremiah Nyaga. We had those leaders that were regional leaders. And one of the things that we did politically that I think our governments have failed us all through is what we call civil education. Civil education has been suppressed so much for the political elite to continue to hold their positions until, I'm with Fiona when she's talked about. I visited Parliament once when I was a kid in school and saw how Parliament looked like, and I was very politically encouraged, like, hey, I might want to join this at one point of time. But when we go to the exact civil education, my parents, our grandparents, they're not taught what their rights are. They're not taught how the government participation is. They don't know how the government runs. They just know we have an election coming up. And when we have an election, money is going to point to our streets. That's the only time we'll be able to see our politicians here. And that's pretty much it. And they are comfortable with that because nothing else has been taught to them. Come to the Gen Zs and the introduction of the internet. Now they're able to connect. They're able to see globally. Now we're a global market. They're able to go globally and see how are other countries run. What are the rights of the people? And this is the big difference that we're seeing between, and I'm sorry to say, our political opposition that has been there trying to keep the government in check, not understanding how do they keep the government in check, whereas it's composed of the same politicians who recycle themselves. So the Gen Zs now have made a step ahead because they look at other countries that are well governed. What do the public do? How does public participation happen? One of the failures of my government that I supported, I still support the president. I think we still have the best agenda if we follow the plan to the T. I participated in writing of that manifesto. Diaspora, actually, for the first time, we have a diaspora department that was created because of the push that we did. But if what happened is when the elite got into power and they realized that this president was not going to play around. If he was to implement this plan to the T, then guess what? The elites are going to be completely eroded and they're going to be out because it was a hustlers movement. Hustlers started understanding their rights, and so it got squashed. And the failure that I correct my president today, and I wish president could listen to this and understand, the biggest failure that we had became to the communication of government to the people. That office of government spokesperson, and I'm sorry to say, has not played a role to explain exactly what the government is doing. For example, I'll give you a good example. Last year, 2023-2024 fiscal year, we collected, the revenues that were collected were 11.1% more than the previous year. We collected around 2.46 trillion Kenyan shillings versus the 2.1 trillion shillings the previous year. But where did that money go, right? Did we get better services than the previous years? The unemployment that still stands today, it's still Actually, it's even a little bit worse than it was before. We did have programs come up, for example, the housing program. I did support the housing program, but the way it was implemented was very wrong. The way it was rolled out was very wrong. So that role of the government speaking to the people, educating the people of what it's doing, has been squashed with a reason. And that's what the Gen Zs have realized. Guess what? We have been played all along for us to continue doing this. I also do fault Gen Zs just a little bit when it comes to public participation. Until this tax bill came along and people realized what was happening, that's when they really got involved. But we've been having these issues for a long time. My generation has failed as well, especially the millennials. I had a lot of hope with the millennials when we were getting into 2017, the way we came out, we started understanding politics, we were all getting involved into it. Further, after that, to realize, guess what? We need to continue this conversation. So what happened, even look at the elections. The diaspora is a very good example. In 2022, we participated. We were on here, tulikuwa kwa mitandao, trying to make sure that we are telling people immediately after the elections what happened. We all went mute. And we were like, we are done. It's a continuous process. And I'm hoping Gen Zs are going to continue with this. They're going to continue to put the government in tow, on their toes to make sure that the right things are done. The last point I want to make on this is, as we move forward, my pledge to Gen Z, since they have very good platforms, is figure out how civil education is going to get enhanced, how people are going to understand the Constitution, understand what your rights are, understand what your vote carries, the power in your vote to shape your future, your kids' future going forward. So that is something I would encourage Gen Zs to also start looking forward. Of course, I do understand where the president is coming from, trying now to do town halls, bring them in, but still, we still have a long way to go. And I'm hoping my president is going to open his eyes and realize, guess what? It's not the political elites going forward that are going to be able to shape our country.
Okay, so thank you, Sam. The only panelist who's permitted a little bit bias is Sam, because his contribution to the political process has been very open and in public. So I think it would be unfair for us to cut him off. So Sam, obviously, thank you for expressing your views. So thank you. You have good points though here, and I'm going to go back to Nairobi. Fiona, you're on the ground. You're the best person, by the way, to tell the Kenyans abroad what's happening there. I want us to focus on two generations. And I've said this before on a previous show. This is actually not about Gen Z. Quite frankly, it's not about Gen Z. It is a state of our nation. Whether it's a Gen X, Gen L, whatever you want to call it, it's a collective effort, collective failure, you want to call that. I think in your language, Fiona, we'll be talking about the digital immigrants and the digital natives. And clearly what's happening and what Sam is saying, the digital immigrants, our generation, didn't play really a very good role. And until now, the digital natives, who happen to be the Gen Zs, are really awakening what I'm calling the conscience of a sleeping nation. From your vantage point, what are some of the facing nations? Going to talk about digital transformative efforts to make sure that socially, economically, and geopolitically that we're working together. And again, as you respect attention to, that tens of thousands of Kenyans abroad, and actually even friends of Kenya who are paying attention to what's happening in Nairobi. What's your reaction? What are the challenges and how do we move forward from here?
I think that the current situation raises a lot of opportunities. And some of those have been mentioned by Sam as in his just last remarks. And there is where I would like to pick up from. What are the opportunities? That for every challenge, there is a way of sorting it out, which becomes an opportunity. I've been involved in policy development, and at one point we thought government would call us, those of us who are very active in the policy development space, as a matter of checking the box. If they can, we would then go through processes where you wouldn't know when a bill is out. You just hear it's in the first reading. It was never published. It was never online. It's like it's pulled from under the table. Then it goes through very fast. And that was beginning to get very frustrating. So I'm happy with the movement that is happening now by whichever group they call themselves. Why? Because it's creating an opportunity for transparency. And technology provides that platform. Why? Because everything, even the Hansard of Parliament, is supposed to be online. At the end of the day, as a Kenyan, you should be able to go online and see what have parliamentarians discussed? What did my member of parliament say? What value did they put into this document they were discussing? It is a public document. There is no such thing as government secrets anymore, you know? So all of us, whether you are a digital native or a digital immigrant, we need to get out of our comfort zones. Kenyans have been too comfortable sitting there and letting things be somebody's business. I've been involved in drafting ICT policy, and sometimes you look for stakeholder input and participation, and because the general public that is going to be affected are not speaking, we have to agree that the corporates will speak from their corporate perspective, and then the regulator must speak from the consumer perspective. Why? Because you Kenyans, the consumers, don't seem to be interested in some of these decisions. Then when something is passed, because the feedback is so low and something is passed, we don't get the position we wanted because our impact was not felt. So that kind of push that we got during the finance bill should be the same push we get during, for example, there's a startup bill that is being prepared by the Ministry of Trade. How does this impact on Kenyans who want to start businesses in Kenya? Because until we begin to set up new businesses in Kenya, we have nowhere to employ people. We cannot create that employment. So we must begin with ourselves, those of you who can and are in a position to, and you can get credit out there. Can you get that credit, come and start a business? One of the things that I do is helping entities set up businesses in Kenya. And that has been something I've done for the last 14 years. I understand the processes, I understand the impact of policy on ICT businesses in particular, because that's my area of specialty, and I'm able to then guide and help get the startups. We need those businesses in. Without those opportunities for employment, we are also then limiting the Kenyans who can be taxed to a small group, you know. But if we have more businesses, then we also have a stronger private sector where we can guide governments and tell them these particular government policies are not conducive for our private sector investments. We want the policy to change. Why is it so hard to get credit in Kenya? You know, it is, as a business, first of all, it is difficult to get business. On a personal level, Kenyans don't even operate on credit. It is a cash economy. For how long are we going to be cash economy? Where you guys are around the world, you're operating, you're able to do many things and do a lot of things because credit. You have a credit card which you pay maybe 30%, 50%, 80% of it, depending on what arrangements you have. And then, you know, on a monthly basis, and that gives you more revenue and income to be able to use for different things. And even when you go for a credit loan, you're able to get it. In Kenya, it's so difficult to access credit. And in some cases, sorry, I have to just put this as it is. As a woman, when you go to access credit, they want to know who's your husband. What is your husband making? Do you have permission from your husband? But when the man goes to get credit, they don't ask him whether the wife has given permission, you know? He is just able to sort of access. So the standards are not the same. And these are all colloquial things that used to happen in the past when I would need permission from my husband to get a loan for my business. It is a business loan. It is not a family loan. So that there should be a distinction between my business and my other life. The other thing that we need to look at is when we're talking about being able to turn things around. Today, you can open a business, run it in Kenya, or run it for Kenyans, and still be where you are in the diaspora. So register the business in Kenya. and have technology tools that help you ensure that the business is running and running well. It is the same concept that allows foreign firms to come in, set up business in Kenya, but they have no staff sitting here because they don't understand this haphazard tax regime we have. They don't be caught up in it. So they don't employ any staff to sit in Kenya. They pick another country in Africa and they have their staff supporting Kenyan market sitting in another country or sitting in the Middle East. These are things that you can do. And these are things that would help to spur the economy in Kenya. Until we are doing things to move the economy forward, we are going to find ourselves in situations where the Gen Zs have ideas of things that need to be done, and many of them really don't want to travel in planes and leave home. They've discovered you can use technology and work from your home. You can support an AI company in Germany and work, and you've never even set foot in Nairobi. You are in the village, but you've got internet. The ICT hubs that government is planning to have in each of the constituencies, that is somewhere where we can partner and work together as Kenyans with our members of parliament to make sure that those hubs are not being built as cyber cafes. Guys don't want cyber cafes. People want hubs where you can come in and work and gain revenue and get income out of the whole thing, as well as building your skills, training, capacity building. There's a lot that can go in an ICT hub. Unfortunately, our strategy of approaching the hubs is a bit of a challenge. Why? Because we've not brought in partners. We need partners for this. The Kenyans in the diasporas can be partners to facilitate the development of ICT hubs so that everybody within our constituencies, because the hubs are being budgeted per ward. So a ward basically is a place where we can reach. It is that our localist level of governance in terms of leadership, the MCAs. Reach out to your MCAs, find out about the hubs. What is the game plan? What are they waiting for?
To be honest,
and things like that.
Fiona, by the way, thank you. You're incredibly
Yes.
eloquent, and you're the kind of person that we need in Nairobi. I think the panelists will agree with me. The passion, the eloquence, and the knowledgeability that you have is incredible, and I think we're very proud of you. Now, in addition to that, I think it's good to say this on record to the Gen Zs that the diaspora community is very proud of what you guys are doing in the streets. That suffering will not go down in pain. I'm sure everybody across the world. And I think you can see that in different capitals around, especially across Africa. People are saying we got to use technology to change the way government does. Now, to your point, I'm going to put this on screen. I don't know if you'll be able to see that on screen. We do have, there is a diaspora tech partnership that is coming up in Nairobi on September 8th and 9th, and we can share this after the show. Our friend here, Dr. Mark Ouma, they're working to make sure that how do we partner? I think I will get in touch with you so that you connect these two together. So good point, Fiona, and I'm going to come back to you in a moment because as we're in the diaspora, you're on the ground, we're going to come to get your voice. But I'm going to get to Professor Priscilla here as we watch the clock. Priscilla, you just heard what the two are saying. Some very eloquent about politics. Fiona making an extremely strong point about the need for technology, not just in the streets, but to talk about the general creative economy as well. That's where we'll go forward. But again, to your specialty, let's focus on the human part of people get exhausted. There are burnouts. There's post PSTDs. How do they play a role here? And provide that review, Professor Priscilla, please.
Yeah, so actually, I wanted to touch on this, and thank you for Ms. Fiona for bringing that up. Is these hubs, these spaces, we call them in the mental health field safe spaces, and not just a safe space to express yourself emotionally, but to do so through your skill set. All of us right now will end this discussion and feel like, oh, today was a great Sunday because we were able to come and showcase our skills, but most importantly, discuss and enjoy something we're passionate about. And when we're discussing these protests, there are people who are activists. There are those social activists, mental health activists. And when we all come together, there's still that aspect of compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue and how we define it is basically mental and physical exhaustion that can occur when someone feels the pain and stress of the others that they are helping. So Miss Fiona was able to kind of highlight the different aspects of the protest. There are those that are in the actual writing of it, sitting there with Parliament, and then there are those who are the Gen Z protesters and their parents and their loved ones who are also feeling the compassion fatigue because I was watching a clip online. There were many clips surfacing, but this one caught my eye, and it was a mother telling her daughter, continue to push the change that we tried in our age and we have been trying to speak over and over, but now you all are actually being heard. And she had tears in her eyes. And that is the definition of compassion fatigue. Is the mother's telling her daughter that each day you get out and protest, you are making us stronger who have been fatigued for years, right? Um, and so again, as I touched on before, I'm looking at it at the after effects. And when I say after effects, there are effects right now. But once everything, quote unquote, dies down, that might be subjective to everybody, depending on what the outcome they're looking for. But once the waters settle, let me say that, I'm really concerned about the compassion fatigue, excuse me, of not just the people protesting, but even those inside the walls of Parliament, even those that maybe have had their voices oppressed. What will that look like, right? There's the ICT hubs. That's just one space to empower people professionally. But if Madare is the only hospital that can really deal with mental health crisis, which it's sad to know that 22 out of 47 counties in Kenya do not have psychiatric units. This is something that is going to have to be addressed. And yes, this is one avenue, doing so online. Kudos to Gen Z for pushing that platform. But even on the ground, there's a saying, vitu kwa ground ni different, but truly, how are we going to be able to make this movement flow on the ground, to have these spaces where people can sit and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling after the protest. I lost someone. I was affected by this. How do we move forward now? So that compassion fatigue is still there. I think we can all feel it. And, acknowledging those that lost loved ones, excuse me. Um, Condolences to you, to those that witnessed traumatic things. Condolences to you. I hope you're taking the time to heal, and find a space to where you can regain that energy to go out and use your voice again.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Professor Priscilla. Here, we still have some time, about 13 minutes to go. I'm gonna get to you before I get to Fiona, and this is a discussion I had with lots of people while across the country, Nairobi and other cities, talking about this, and they're telling me, hey, you guys, mkomaju, you are comfortable wherever you are. You keep talking on social media, but you're not helping. There's a problem on the ground. Your families are here. Your friends are here. At home, just talking from mouth not help at all. And until we see you guys actively involved on the ground, then you need not to talk. In fact, it's even worthless for us to keep talking here if we don't. Sam, you've been here for a long time. You've made massive contributions in different organizations. What role do you really think the diaspora community should do so that this time is not just talk, but we should really translate this talk in actionable and worthwhile?
Actually, yeah, this is very good. That's something we've been talking about and thinking for quite a while. What is the role of diaspora when it comes to shaping the Kenya that we deserve? We've been, fortunate enough to visit, live, work outside Kenya, see how other countries are run, and I also want to duplicate what we have here. One of the things that I'm going to say as I proceed, I also want to give my condolences over to Fiona, to her team as well, the family of her team member who lost their lives. That is something that I do believe should not happen in our country. One life is too many to lose. And part of that is, I know the government, and there's conflicting things here. Having been also fortunate enough to sit in some meetings, government meetings, where I see how strategies are being laid out on how to bring, the new generation on board and how to engage them. We've also had some issues here, and I'll come back to your question. I just want to address this so that it's also very clear. We've also had some issues of interested parties infiltrating into this movement and causing chaos. We've seen a lot of issues come around whereby people have been caught on camera paying people to go either counter the movement or join the movement into looting and all that. So that is something else that I know it becomes a little bit tricky for the movement for them to be able to distinguish themselves from the group that has been paid to come and do this. So there's a lot of issues there, and I'm hoping the government is sorting that out. But coming back to diaspora, what is our role as diaspora for us to be able to continue with educating our people? First and foremost is transfer of skills. The State Department of Diaspora Affairs, under the leadership of P.S. Njogu, has actually played a key role of encouraging diasporas to be able to partner up with people of the same profession back home. So we're seeing that happening. A few programs have been rolled out. I know some in healthcare sectors, some in the IT sector, whereby we can be able to have diasporans either take some time to go back home, help with some skills, and those skill transfers. At the same time, on the political part, I am disappointed with diaspora because diaspora does not want to participate when we call for dialogue as diasporans on how we can help our countries. We are very good as keyboard, I call them keyboard warriors on WhatsApp, how we are feeling, how we hit the government, how we want to do that. But the question is, what are you going to do? So one of the key things that we're asking is going forward on public participation is make sure, and this I started with myself and a few others from my constituency, which is Mbeere North. A member of parliament from Mbeere North, when he does public participation, one of the key things that we did and we told him is a must. Any issue that calls on public participation, diaspora has to be involved. And we organize, we don't even wait for him to do it. We organize the Zoom meetings. We invited him to the Zoom meetings. We ask him questions. His PA is there, and then we keep tabs of that. One thing that has come out of that, my member of parliament, Rocco, nowadays, he started on a quarterly basis. He has, he gives out all what has been done. It's basically, he summarizes what we came up with, what has been done, and what's not done. Right? It's a scorecard, basically. It's a scorecard that he does every quarter. But now we are pushing him to have it on a monthly basis, that scorecard. And it's shared all amongst us. And we also have, like, every single ward has its own WhatsApp group. Ideas are captured there. And the aspirants on those wards where you come from, we participate in those. So my request for diaspora is, politics is also local. Find out what can you do from the ward. The same way Fiona said that we have to participate on the ward level. Start there as we come up, as we try to see diaspora to come together. The other thing is also a challenge is to majority of diasporans who are able to travel back home. When you find time to go back home, I know, yes, it's your vacation. I understand it's your time with your family, but spend a day or two to participate in shaping your country. That is, engage your political leaders, tell them your stand. And one of the things that I tell the aspirants is, and especially is true, we have the power of the past when it comes to this politics too. In as much as they are corrupt leaders, they have stolen a lot of money, we can find good leaders on the ground and support them. They might not win today, but the people will see and start recognizing them. The next election cycle, we continue to support them and we'll get that leadership. I take a good example with the Republicans here, Mitch McConnell, when he started the judicial revolution, and 25 years ago, he said at one point the bench will be composed of conservatives. It took time. They went to high schools. They realized who are the people from. Okay, it was also elite, but who can we be able to support and eventually be on the Supreme Court? Brett Kavanaugh is one of those. He was a project of McConnell, and you can see how the Supreme Court of this country looks like, but it took time for them to start there. Diaspora, we can start our time now. We know how leadership should be. We understand our people when it comes to elections. Wakipatiwa 500 wanapatiana kura yao, they suppress the vote that way. We understand all these things. What we can do is support young leaders who understand the issues, who have the morals and integrity that we can be able to see and support them. That is the role of diaspora.
Good, excellent. Thank you, Sam. Oh, for the first time, you are more objective.
My
I
goodness,
think we should have you more on KDL TV. Probably we'll move you from the far end to the middle. I think
that's
you
what
hear
we've been
more
fighting
from
for all through. Even when you
we
when you
bring
take
these
a
guys
look
at
at
the
the
center.
manifesto we crafted, when you look at the
Yes.
manifesto we crafted, this was all part of it. The problem has been how to implement that manifesto. And I truly believe the president is the right person to still implement that. The biggest issue that we have are the people who support him, the
Okay.
people around him, the people who
Okay.
should be able to help him implement that.
Good. And again, Bjorn, I'm going to come to you. Just thank you, Sam. Key point here. Next week, by the way, we'll be talking about good governance. I think Professor Nasongo, Professor Muley, and others will be on the show to talk about the movement from the hustler nation to Gen Z. So next week will be really deep politics. Good points, by the way. But let's get to you, Viona. Again, we are talking from afar, from across the oceans. You are on the ground. You talk to people on a daily basis, whether it's border guys, your colleagues in the tech industry, watch the aspect of Kenya. What role did the diaspora community should play to make sure that this time around we don't see young people in the streets, we don't see destruction of property, we don't see shit? What role should really the diaspora community do, in your view, please?
Thank you so much, Dr. I think one of the things that the diaspora need to do have been mentioned by Sam. If you do not get involved, this Kenya is not changing. There is no magic, nothing that is going to make Kenya change to be the Kenya we want unless you participate. So there has to be a conscious effort to participate in your local localities, your local environments, as in where your families are. Participate in the governance process, participate in the conversations. I like what Sam has done with his leaders, getting them into Zoom. You can have those Zoom platforms, you can have the X Spaces. There's so much technology that can be used to just keep in touch and keep track of what for the diaspora votes, for there to be more countries included in that voting process, because it's one thing to participate in the conversation, it's another when you have to vote, for you to have to make a trip back home to be able to vote. So can the voting process the countries be included and broadened so that there are more of them than they were in the last election? And then the other thing is, please try and invest back home. When you invest back home, then you're creating an opportunity where we are able to make a difference. Those of us who are at home and can still make a difference, we're able to make a difference with the opportunities of investing that you bring. We will not be in the same place as we were when you're a country and you have got 100 companies, you're better off with 1,000 of them, and we can have them increase the number of businesses that there are. However, with your permission, Dr. I would just like to also make use of this opportunity to bring in, ask Dr. Priscilla a question, and this is because of our involvement on the ground. When we have had the protests, one of the things that for me is a major pain point is we don't seem to know when they are will be at a point where they will end. So we have been like in a state of limbo. And here you are identifying so many things that we need to work with, so many emotions that need to be dealt with. Yet we've not even dealt with the emotions of how this demonstration, we are peaceful, suddenly turned into massacre scenes. There's been a lot of fear of abduction, to a point that today you call me, you're telling me you're from a certain ministry, I say, no, write a letter. And what you're calling me for, is it in the public domain? If it is not, please, let me just leave me alone. Let me just have my peace. Why? The trust that we had in each other as Kenyans has really been broken. And I don't know how we will be able to heal, especially where engagement of Raia and Serikali is concerned. Because the Raia have been beaten crazy. Other than losing a staff, last week after the protests on Thursday, my other staff member who lives in Zimmerman, Kawaskari area, on their street, Mirema Drive, there was shooting by the police. They could not record. There was no, as in, you could not record. They were shooting the balconies. It was scary to try and put it out there. It is scary for me even talking about it on this platform, but I pray to God I'm covered. The scenes that happened there have not been reported anywhere except a few Twitter handles. And even those Twitter persons who reported, it's like people are not sure where they are. When we live in that kind of environment, we are into a space where I don't think we are going to get healing. I think we are going to be full of, we were angry, we were frustrated, now we are scared. When do we get healing, and how, and where do we start?
On that note, Professor Priscilla, as you compose your thought to respond to that question, I'm going to add another one so that you have the same time. Looking at the diaspora, yes, there is an emotional part on the ground, but also acknowledge that in the diaspora is actually even worse. People sleeping at night, watching the news and having these phone calls. It's very restless and very disturbing. And then to Sam's point, then you end up not having these keyboard warriors, as eloquently described by Sam. How do we control our emotions so that when we relay whatever information, whether it's in writing, whether it's on phones, or whether it's whatever we post on our social media platform, does not ignite the fire that would otherwise have been controlled sooner than enough? Professor, please.
Yes. So I'm trying to find a different word to use because I cannot use the definition we would say online. It might offend some, but let's just say when people get used to seeing images that are graphic, that are horrific, right? The mind can naturally, the mind should be disgusted, right? The mind should be, oh my goodness, that's repulsing. Of course, those that end up being doctors or coroners, they are taught how to handle that, right? Or maybe they have a positive interest in those lines, right? Because God gives us different gifts. But naturally, there should be that shock in the human psyche when we're looking at bodies on the ground or blood. And I think, unfortunately, media and just the way information is given out, we have become desensitized to where, unfortunately, I found myself even doing that, and I have brought myself to be more present to say, oh my goodness, somebody lost their life in Kenya. That is so sad. And you see the bodies being pulled out of the water, and it is sad. But then you go through the drive-through and order, I don't know, your coffee, and you're kind of emotionally numb. So I would say, number one, being aware that we do not condition our mind to get used to those images because it's easy to do so. The brain is easily taught, but it can also be unlearned per se. And so for those people that are relaying information, I think being mindful that some people don't handle crisis well. And so is asking the person, it may take time. Are you in a place that I can tell you this information? Everything is, I'm okay, but I do not have good news. So this is what happened. I think not being prophets of doom per se when we're giving information, even though it is saddening, it is heavy, we can relay it in a way that that person is able to receive it, and then maybe pausing and saying maybe today isn't the day to share anything. I was with my siblings and I told them I took a social media break because I found myself just scrolling to where, oh, that's a dead body, oh, another tear gas, oh. And I had to tell myself, no, our minds were not trained to take in this type of information and just push it aside as if it's nothing. We should be moved to compassion. We should be moved to kind of just say, wow, that is sad. And I think it goes back to compassion fatigue. Sometimes when you are fatigued, you can also become emotionally numb. So to answer your question, Dr. Okari, how can people relay traumatic messages? I would say via phone call would be best because you're able to control the emotions of the person that you're giving the information to. And starting off by asking, are you stationary? Are you in a place that I can tell you this? how is your day going? Maybe introducing that, because if they're not having a good day, that isn't the day to share something that might be the tipping point. I
Okay.
hope I answered your question.
You did, and you did. Just a reminder, as I want to get speak with the two ladies from a moment, I get Sam to help us conclude this call in a few minutes. So thank you, Priscilla. Excellent perspective. Again, those ones who are watching, please feel free to make your comments on our Facebook page on KDR TV or YouTube. We'll collect those viewpoints and probably help us dissect the next conversation later next week. So, Fiona, if you could speak to this population in Nairobi on the to be in the streets in Nairobi, what struck me most, unlike what I'd seen years before, was that this time round, there were lots and lots of young women in the streets ready to fight for their country. What changed and what role should we play going forward in shape of our nation? Your response, and also a quick response from Fiona before I bring Sam in.
Thank you so much, Dr. I think what brought the women out, first of all, was the finance bill. We were chokorwad, for lack of a better word. Allow me to use that. When you go to the beehives and you start to put a stick into it, the bees will come out and they'll sting. And so what happened was, all of a sudden, those tax increased on sanitary towels that was going to make them totally unaffordable. And then the members of parliament who are being interviewed were being very arrogant and saying, we don't use sanitary towels, we use tampons. Hello? That just ticked the women off. Then there was an increase in the cost of diapers. And people stopped using nappies years ago. Nowadays, everyone uses diapers for their kids. So when they say the cost of diapers is going to increase by 100 shillings per piece, I have diapers of 30 pieces at a time, like for a week. So if you're buying for the month, you'll end up buying quite a number. So 30 pieces increasing by 100 shillings, that is by how much the cost of diapers was going to go up. That brought even pregnant women to the streets. And so the scene then was, the women were quite vocal and quite aggressive, and they were really at the forefront when the demonstrations have started. And the sight of pregnant women actually helped the police not to come in with bullets at the beginning of the demonstration, because they're saying we are peaceful. Are you going to shoot a pregnant woman? No. And then the young people were there as well. And so having the mothers, having the women, having the girls in the streets, and they were peaceful. So it looked like it was going to be peaceful. Only that now they didn't know at what point the patience of government seemed to have reached its extreme. And on that particular day when the shooting started, no one expected there to be shooting live bullets. They expected to just be the tear gas, and as usual, and then the crowd, and they've had their day. But the women are also beginning to feel very frustrated because where I don't know. I'm trying to get the right words to just put it out there, but the way I would say it would be, as a woman, a young woman, you've finished, you've gone through, your parents have taken you through school, first of all on a loan. Then you come in, you're looking for a job. Then every time you're looking for a job, you're getting this. Society has handled the girls badly, for lack of a better word. And this is because for me as an employer, I've talked to young girls and I've interviewed young girls, and sometimes when they give their stories, you're like, no, that shouldn't happen. If I could hire all the girls in the country, I would hire all of them, but I can't. As a society, we have lost our sense of decency where you protect the girl. And people say, because we drove the agenda of empowering the girl child, apambane na hali yake. We will fight them shoulder to shoulder. That is what the men say. And so when that is happening, we are now creating this tough girl that has to be so tough that she knows she has to fight for herself, even in the streets. Seeing the girls out there is a result of what we, as communities in Kenya, as the Kenyan social fabric, have created and put out there. And the girls were not relenting. And they were the bravest of them all. Even that one who called the police officer, Daddy, sitoki. Because she could see this officer as her daddy. Sitoki hapa, lakini kama unataka nishike venye unataka. You know? That level of courage, that level, you're frustrated, you're looking, you're trying to make ends meet. You can no longer go to daddy to ask for money because you've seen what daddy has sacrificed and mom. You're trying to make amends for yourself. And you don't want to be the girl who's out there messing around, sleeping around with every man to give you money. You're trying to be as decent as you possibly can. And so in that state, and your friends are saying we can go to the streets, this one. And then the boys your generation who should be hanging around with have nothing. So they can't even take you, they can't even. So it's what we have. We have a Kenya that we have created. How do we uncreate it?
Okay. So, good point. So, thank you, Fiona. Thank you for giving that perspective and just sharing experience while in Kenya. I did kind of research and going to different social places in Kenya, and you get what I mean by social places. I was struck the fact that there's so many young women, and every time I sit with them and talking, they have degrees, not just from last year, from the 15 or so years. Most of them probably turned out to be single moms, and they are saying, hey, mom and dad took me to school to have a family, but all of a sudden, that education not making sense. I'm this kind of things. It's really good to see that is a collective failure of our society. Then we get to you, Professor Priscilla, from a psychological and emotional standpoint. We do have the women in the diaspora who, agree with me, research will tell you that our women in the diaspora actually seem to be doing much better socially and economically compared to the men. Given what the ladies are doing on the ground in Nairobi and across the streets in Kenya, and they don't have that economic power, yet the ladies in the diaspora do have this social and economic power. What role should the female community in the diaspora do to enhance that socio-economic and geopolitical development of our nation? With an understanding that in 2 weeks' time, we'll be having a panel of exclusive ladies talking about that aspect. Professor Priscilla.
To just echo Ms. Fiona, I agree. I would definitely create and hire them all as well, the girl child. I think.
So Sam will hire the boys.
Yes, and I'm also passionate about the boy child as well, because there are.
Sam, you've been next to the boys as Priscilla gets that thought through. Please think through because you got to make a defense for the men and the boys. Go ahead, Professor, please.
I'm definitely compassionate about the boy child as well. That's a different conversation that we would need to have. But I think for sure, as women, one of the best things that we do best, and I know Miss Fiona can echo this, is, for example, if we have a kiama, you will see women, they will go out, they will raise those funds. If there is a need, women will rally, right? The song that says, Atumia, muevere. Truly we are, because we know how to create those spaces. We know how to gather women and say, okay, this is the topic. How are we going to address it? How are we going to meet the need? And I would tell all the women and young girls listening here to continue shining your voice, creating those spaces of advocacy to make sure that these problems are met, like Ms. Fiona said, in a space of decency and decorum, right? Being able to respect the elders, but also say, I'm not moving because I have a voice. My voice is my right. And that is the most liberating expression of the human experience, is when you can share your voice unapologetically. And so, to answer your question, Dr. Okari, I would tell the young women to continue being advocates. Because again, let me quote Chimamanda Ngozi. She says, for me, feminism is a movement for which the end goal is to make itself no longer needed. We should have a society where girls and boys can both come together and advocate for things that, yes, they may lean to one side as more female issues or male issues, but in general, they are societal issues, because we cannot have women without the men and vice versa. So I would say continue championing for those spaces, and decency and decorum is a beautiful thing, because you can always go back to that and say, I did so from a space of honor, but from a space of passion, right? Nothing was wrong. Miss Fiona said they were peaceful. We were peaceful. And so that is what we're going to continue to do, but also make sure that you understand that we have space, right?
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Professor Sam. Quick reaction, and then I'll go back to a closing statement from the two ladies and you. Now, the ladies have eloquently made the case for the ladies, but again, in the streets across the country, there are boys who really want to be men, who want to be fathers, who want to lead their families and the community, but unfortunately, due to the conditions on the ground, it's not working. Yet we also have men here in the diaspora. You call them keyboard warriors. What role should the men do to enhance that conversation to better levels?
Thank you, Dr. This topic is dear to my heart. Full disclosure, I'm a father of girls. My girls range from 20 years old to my youngest, Zaria, who just turned 3 years old. So I'm passionate about the girl child. At the same time, I look at the boys that I interact with, the young men that I interact with when I'm in Kenya on social media, and see their frustrations. And the biggest frustrations is especially when society has defined the role of a man as a provider and then unable to provide. They're looking at their age mates. The best they can do, the best advice that they can tell them is, let's go out, let's hang out, and let's drink the cheapest liquor that we can drink cause to drain away our frustration. So this goes back to mental health, goes back to our society being drained. I'll take a good example, and this is, I come from Mount Kenya region, and I'll specifically even look at the Mount Kenya itself. We have scarcity of land, first and foremost. Farming, when I was growing up, farming was key in Mount Kenya, and then we turned into businesses. And our young men were so into you can start your own thing, a small business, prosper, make it to a bigger business. Now, even the starting point is not there. That starting point of even getting credit to start a very small either border business or something of the sort is not there. So what ends up is this young men turn up into drug abuse. When they turn up into drug abuse, they can't even protect their sisters. They can't even protect their mothers, their aunties. When the ladies are going out to the world to look for jobs, they hear the frustrations of what they're going through, but they can't even help. Depression kicks in. The depression among the young men in Kenya is so bad that I went to my own area in Chicago and I saw, we had this Mogoka business going on. But when they sell this Mogoka, the first thing they do, the small money that they get, because they don't know what else to do, they get into the bar at 8 in the morning, drink all day. I was with the deputy president, and I do support his initiative when it comes to drug abuse, especially alcohol, to ensure that what can we do to rehabilitate these young men, for us to give them even some skills to start a business. And we all talk about that. Give them something, teach them, but where do they get that credit? Goes back to Ms. Asonga's point of view. Government has a major role to play when it comes to credit. One thing I was for the Hustler Fund, and I was thinking the Hustler Fund could help, was to tap into that. The management of it was not there at all. The way it was rolled out, it wasn't there. So, and the government, where I fault the government is we had great ideas. We have these big ideas. The problem we have in Kenya is we recycle the same politicians that have been there. They just switch parties and go into that. Yes, you can fault the president has done that before as well for him to get there. That was the norm. But there was a lot of hope in our president when he got there of what the manifesto was going to deliver. Is there now, do we still have hope? I do believe Kenya is going to change. And watch and mark my words today, 2027, there will be a great movement. And we are realizing, and I'm just hoping from now to 2027, those who know they're not coming back as politicians, if you still, we are coming for you in 2027 because you will have to pay that single cent. Every person now in Kenya is so active and they can see what's happening. To the girl child and to Miss Fiona's point and what diaspora can do, ladies in diasporas have prospered, and we and Dr. Kari, you can bear witness to this. A lot of men went through a lot of depression because of the culture shock that came, especially for people who migrated here, who had families, and they came here and roles changed. We have been fighting that space, mental health for people. We've seen a lot of young people also commit suicide because of the way the parents have been, the family structures in the diaspora, how they're broken up, and all that. But the hope that I look at is if we sit down and we ask ourselves, especially the ladies, there's this organization called Kwitu. I've seen them do a lot of work back home. They're building, they're buying land, building houses. But can they get into a space of either mentorship, being able to guide these girls, and us as men also guide our boys and tell them there is hope. And that hope for me, I believe, and I truly believe with every ounce of my body, that it begins with civil education. The moment
Okay.
we engrail civil education to our people, they understand their rights, they understand who they are as a people, that the government belongs to the people. We are the government. When you go to the preamble of our constitution, we the people, that is what should be instilled. And I'm hoping this new movement is going to take time to go back mashinani, teach the people what it means for you to have a voice, for your vote to count, and for you to have leaders of integrity and people who follow the law and understand what ethics mean. So once we start there, the ripple effect will come. The girl child will be respected. The boy child will have hope. The boy child will have ways of providing for their families and all that. But for me, I truly believe that is where we need to reset back to. Thank you.
Guys, a lot of time. So just go around the group so that we conclude this. By the way, it's very insightful contribution. I appreciate that. And I'm sure Professor Priscilla was running elsewhere to church. So out of that respect, we're going to wrap this up. And I'm going to start with that. Priscilla, if you went to bed tonight, you were to say a prayer for a country, the Kenya we deserve. As a closing statement, what could be your prayer?
Mine would be authenticity. I think that is the foundation of it, is when we are authentic and we can look at ourselves and say, I need to change, or I'm doing well here, then everything else will begin. And, you can't be transparent. You can't be transparent if you're not authentic, right? Because at some point, secrets will unfold, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it's authenticity in our leaders, authenticity in the foundation of our nation. And that may come through these voices, right? And we can see that. So that would be the foundation for me.
Okay, kind of Professor Priscilla. And then Viona, same question to you tonight. You're almost getting to bed shortly there in Nairobi, but tonight I'm sure you're going to say a prayer for the nation. What would that prayer be?
I think mine would be a look at what has brought us here in terms of our failings, being cognizant of where we have gone wrong, and being able to begin to take steps to make a change. And part of those steps include issues of, in addition to authenticity and transparency, is the whole issue of accountability in our governance structures, and being able to be honest and truly accountable. If we can change our behavior and be accountable, then we will not need to have corruption. We will not, all these things will start going away. Why? Because we'll use technology correctly. We have deployed good technology, sometimes borrowed from other countries where it has worked, like Sweden, Norway. It comes to Kenya. Technology from Israel failed in Kenya, and it was the first time it ever failed. Why did it fail? Because we did not use it correctly. My prayer is that Kenyans can begin to be people of integrity, honesty, transparency. Why? Because technology is going to put all that out there eventually. The Gen Zs have demonstrated there is no secret today. They know you, they know you're a married man, you have a girlfriend, you're a leader who's misbehaving, all that information goes online. It becomes public information. And it's not leaked from sources you can identify. So that is the Kenya that we've come. And if that is what it's going to take for people, individual, because it has to start at a personal level, for individual accountability to happen, for us as a country to have national public accountability, so be it. Why? Because the technology is already there. And if you've been messing and fooling around, definitely you're using a location someone must know. There is nothing that is a secret. People know. So our behavior, our attitude, it's time for it to change. Why? Because the public, through the Constitution, know their rights, will continue to understand their rights better and to exercise them. And as a result, you'll find yourself under the bus and in very embarrassing situations. So if you value your integrity as a person and you value your name as an individual and you're a Kenyan leader, this is a clarion call. Change. There is no room for any secrets. Public accountability is the way to go because that's the direction we're taking as a country.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Fiona, as well. So Sam, here I'm going to make this statement as I bring you in so that you make your final prayer. In the end, regardless of our political persuasion, whether you're for the sitting president or not for the sitting president, that is simple. He's human and he happens to be constitutionally the sitting president of the nation, regardless, right? And of course, of everybody, including those ones who have different viewpoints, wish him and the nation a better working so that he can steer the nation forward. So to you, understanding your political persuasion, what could be your prayer?
Thank you. Actually, let me start by this. We are one Kenya. Whether we like it or not, Kenya is our homeland, is our motherland. We have vested interest as Kenyans in our country, regardless of what you just said, what political leanings that you have. At the end of the day, we all want Kenya to succeed. The key thing is how do we get there, right? And what is the right path for us to get there? We agree on a few points, all of us. Corruption has messed up our country. We need to end corruption. Integrity of our leaders is key and paramount because number one, they're the people that our young people look up to. Their leadership, they become mentors to our young people. And we have to ensure that if they have integrity, we know our country will also be respected in the global space. Yes, the internet is there. Fiona has put it very well that guess what? It's a global market. You can find anything that you want and anything that you need there. That also goes to the integrity of the Gen Zs as well. And what I'm asking, because we know from this, from where I sit, we do understand there's been some funding, some people have infiltrated this movement. The Gen Zs have to have the integrity to point this out and lead to their cause, stay to their cause of what they want done. Somebody just joked up with me the other day, and I thought of the idea. They told me, in Kenya, we need to start crowdsourcing for our leaders. Once the president is elected, we tell him for your CSs, we crowdsource, we give you 20 names, people come together, wanachambua watu, wanaleta files zote. Today, I heard in Kenya it's called T. I'm getting to TikTok now. But to ensure that we know the leaders that who we have, what is their integrity, right? One thing I'll say is I have hope for our country. Our country, in as much as it's so chaotic right now, we are heading to a better place. And that place is when people know what their rights are, when people know what they want, when we can be able to vet our leaders. And the moment we respect the campaign finance laws that we have, because we have campaign finance laws in Kenya, right? But they're never respected. The moment we move majority of that money out of the political system such that people can be able to vote on issues and agendas that somebody else has and they're presenting, then our Kenya will be best. I have great hope. I have great hope in Gen Zs, as we call them, millennials, and everybody. But the other thing, too, just to wrap up on that, is we should not ban our country. At the end of the day, it is our country. There are people who labored to make sure that their businesses up and running, and when we destroy them, it's bad. The police should respect the people. Police brutality, we need reforms in the police system. And we need those reforms whereby policing should change the way we look at demonstrations. But at the same time, I fault some of our leaders who have injected some money into this. I also fault some of the organizations who have come into this, brought money from outside to make these movements continue in the wrong directions. Let there be great movements to change our country, but in the right way. So let's respect each other. Let's respect life and properties too as well.
Okay. Oh, thank you. With that eloquently put, Sam brings at the end to this very insightful content. The hope was that we'd be here for 1 hour. It's gone 1.5 hours, and Priscilla was supposed to be in church at this time, still here. That tells you how much this has been insightful. Of course, many thanks to you, Priscilla. Very insightful contribution. I can't getting to know you as a friend. You have no idea how much I appreciate you, how KDR TV appreciates you, and of course, our nation is very proud of what you are doing, you and Dave and the family. As well, Fiona, thank you so very kindly. You're doing great work. I think in technology, I think everybody clearly can tell you're very eloquent. You're the kind of leaders that the nation really needs. And of course, we'll keep engaging with you going forward. As well, my good friend here, Sam, thank you. Great work. You're not new into these things, but you've always done great. We'll try to drive you so that in the future, you'll be on the ground to make sure that we change that nation for the next generation. I can't also thank enough. I also get to our technical team, Ben Kebuato, the CEO, who is in Indiana. So again, Ben, thank you. And of course, the young boys back in Shakopee, Minnesota, who are making sure that this comes live. And of course, those ones also who have been following this on platforms, social media, YouTube and Twitter. Thank you. But don't forget to go up there and subscribe. Just a reminder again, that this is part of what One Voice Consortium, OVC, is known, which is an umbrella organization of Kenyans in the diaspora. We do have a major group really, which encompasses almost 186 different groups scattered across the United States and also others scattered across Europe and, of course, back at home. And so part of what we're trying to do as OVC is try to organize this kind of series so that we can dissect into really what's happening in the Kenya. Week we discuss the legal issues in Kenya. We'll have in a few weeks' time, and then today we're talking about Gen Zs, the young professionals, and you can tell from what they've done here, eloquently articulated what the young people should do to build that nation. And then next week, by the way, we'll be into the political aspect of it. So we'll be diving into the topic will be from the hustler nation to Gen Z. How did we get there? So we'll be one of us will be Professor Shadrach Nasongo, a good friend of mine, a professor of comparative politics from Rhodes in Memphis, Tennessee. We'll also be having John Mulehe. This is a known author and journalist. He'll be joining us again from Maryland. And then, of course, we'll be having Professor Pondwis Owinga, who from Atlanta, Georgia, will be dissecting into that. And then week after that, a colleague here in Temere and some Kenyan ladies discussing of the women socio-economic political development. So again, many thanks again. Keep tuned to here just to enhance this conversation again from the emotional side so that we can be as objective as possible. And in the end, hopefully we can contribute to the well-being of our nation. So on behalf of my friends here, Fiona Songa, Priscilla Oshila, and my good friend here, Sam Mireri, thank you. We'll see you next week.